Good evening, and welcome again to the Dusty Feet. It's Thursday night. It's 10/7, right? So it's the 7th of October. It's been wet in this area of the country for me in Savannah. It's been wet. I don't know what's like where you're at in the States or overseas. I do not know. But I hope that you're safe and well wherever you're at. So, tonight we're talking about the Lord's Prayer, the Matthew series, and Mackie's. We're going through the book of Matthew. We're now in the beginning of chapter 6, and we're at the Lord's Prayer. Tonight's going to be a good one. I've already broken this up into 3 parts. So they've already been edited, meaning the clips that we'll play. I was looking forward to this, and I was trying to figure out how to break these up. So the 3 clips are longer than I normally do on a clip, but I believe that that just seemed the best place to cut it off for that piece. So we'll see how they play out as we listen to them. The series that we've had so far on the homework series is obviously at the Dusty Feet. The homework series videos, or the Matthew series, will be, because the homework series will be continuing. Once we finish Matthew, we'll find another homework series. So the stores is stored under the Matthew series as well. And then the Follow the Red String series that we just finished with Disciple Follower is on there as well. And of course, Twitter for us to get updates. So we're going to take a so this this is going to be challenging. It's going to be something we're going to ruffle some feathers, probably stretch some thoughts, push ourselves a little bit, and maybe take a rabbi trail or two, left or right, kind of broaden our scope a little bit, help us think. Fair? And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go on the Dusty Feet. So, again, Matthew series. So we're going to take ourselves, launch into the video, and then we're going to break apart some things. I'm contemplating, I said it's 3 parts. I'm contemplating a bonus part. I don't know how that bonus part's going to look. I don't know whether it's going to be a red string because we're going to connect some dots, or whether it's just going to be an addendum to this. Kind of like, you get a video and then there's that little tab on the bottom when you were moving, it's extras, right? Whether it be an extra point. Because I think we want to revisit some of the points that we're going to talk about, some tonight, some again the other nights, and connect them. And I also think I want to talk about connections between, say, the Lord's Prayer and the Shema. And I think that's an interesting way to go on this. So we'll see. I'm still walking that out and trying to figure out how I want to do that. So what we're going to first start to do tonight, obviously, is listen to Mackie and hear what he has to say. This is episode 10 of his Matthew series. The link's in the description below. If you haven't, if you're watching this not live afterwards, I suggest you pause and click the link in the description and listen to it in its entirety. Listen to the whole thing. Okay, then you're going to get everything that he's saying. And then we're going to bring this into what we're going to talk about. The reason is sometimes we can bounce around a little bit. You're going to get, or you're going to listen and go, okay, we're not there yet in our discussion. Where's that going to take us? So it's just thoughts, and I think the best if you heard the whole thing first. If not, we're going to listen to this clip. So if you're live, let's enjoy. And here's Mackie with the clip 1.
All right. Hey, everybody. How you guys doing? Happy 2015. That's all I have to say about that. Good to have you guys here. We're as we go through Matthew, we're going through the Sermon on the Mount, and today we're going to take time to explore, probably some of the most familiar words of Jesus in the history of Christianity and in Western culture as a whole. And that's cool that these words have had such an impact, but it's also, I think, the reason why for many or most of us this poem, this short poem that Jesus committed to his disciples. For many of us, it's lost all vitality or all sense of motivating energy in our lives. For many of us, these words are overly familiar and are dead for us. And so what I'd like to do is to, first of all, just explore the power and the significance of this short poem, and I think the role that Jesus meant it to have in the life of his followers. And to do that, I'd like for you to listen to 60 seconds of another poem that has had a similar kind of effect, at least in American culture. So close your eyes, do whatever you need to do, but listen with me.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn, and nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop, hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
You want it to finish, don't you? It's such a good song. That's such an amazing song. For lots of different reasons, and let's reflect on why it's such an amazing song. First of all, how many of you have heard that song before? You know it, and virtually all of us, right? And if you haven't, I don't know where you've been, right? But so we've all heard it. How many of you, and don't be bashful, I really want to know, how many of you remember this playing on the radio when it came out? We honor you who have gone before, us, right? So. What year? What year are we talking here? 1967. And what band are we listening to in those 60 seconds? Oh, now this is interesting. Either you're bashful, well, all of us know this song, but how many of us actually know who wrote it and who sang it? What band are we listening to? Okay, all right, 20 of you know. Buffalo Springfield. And lead singer, whose voice are we hearing? Who wrote the song? Two of you know, right? So Stephen Stills, who later joined two others to make up Crosby, Stills, and Nash. You guys, New Year's resolution, know the history of folk rock in the 70s in the America. Are you guys kidding me? Okay, so Stephen Stills. So what's actually that itself is interesting. That whatever, like half a dozen people know who wrote it. 20 people know the name of the band. We've all heard it. And here's actually why I play it for you, and here's why I think this song is significant and why it helps us think about the Lord's Prayer, is as almost all of us have heard the song, which means that this song conjured up images in your mind, didn't it, when you heard it, right? It conjured up a time period, certain events, certain milestone moments, certain movies, right? Unless you've heard it, so some of you actually have never heard the whole song, right? You've heard the sample in Public Enemy song, right? You got game. Or you've heard it in Forrest Gump, right? Or you actually understand the importance of music history for understanding America, and you actually have listened to this song. But name it, what moments in American history, what scenes or images are coming to your mind when you listen to that song? The Vietnam, first thing. What else? What's that? Penn State protests. Mm-hmm. What else? Yeah, assassination, Martin Luther King. Almost all of those events. Any Woodstock? Anybody? Woodstock came to somebody's mind. Or you're thinking of the Grateful Dead, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so And what years are we talking here? Assassination, the height of the culmination. This song played a role in the momentum of the anti-Vietnam War movement. 1968 was one of the years of great cultural upheaval in America. Here's what's so fascinating about this song, is that somehow there emerge in the history of human civilization and human societies, there are turning points in a culture and times of upheaval and new, cultural movements when a whole generation, all of a sudden things are getting changed and society takes a different turn. There very often emerge poems and songs out of those movements that they begin to transcend even the original circumstances in which they were written, and they come to symbolize like a whole season, a whole decade, of a whole nation. And not only that, they express the change that's happening, but they also begin to create new momentum and new energy for this movement to keep perpetuating itself, which is exactly the role that this song played, which is why it's so interesting about where this song came from. If you read interviews with Stephen Stills, he's very clear. He's like, I didn't write this as an anti-war song. That just wasn't even on my mind at all. What he was the song is about an experience that they had. Buffalo Springfield was playing a set of clubs on Sunset Strip in LA regularly in 1966 and 67. A number of local businesses got together and passed local legislation to instill a curfew on Sunset Strip so that all music and people had to be off the streets by 11 p.m. And so they organize a protest of musicians and music club owners and so on. And so this takes place. And the police show up, and it's kind of this intense experience. And so Stephen Stills writes a song to reflect on the Sunset Strip riots, is what they came. It was 1,000 people. The police showed up, and people left, or whatever. It wasn't really that gnarly. And that was in 1967. The song was released as a single, then an album later in the year. What year did it hit the top 10 charts? 68. So a year later. The song had been out for a year before it actually hit the Billboard charts. And so what are we observing? The fact that a song can transcend its original circumstances, and then all of a sudden, I think this room's a good sample, hundreds of millions of Americans, that song just ignites all kinds of associations and feelings and emotions and moments. And it has nothing to do with what Stephen Stills was intending to do. Contrast Jesus, in my opinion, who actually intended to start a movement. He fully intended to start a movement. And when it came to what he thought he could do to give something to his followers who would then take that and perpetuate the energy and momentum of the movement, what did he do? He gave his disciples a poem that it seems to me, fully expected they would memorize and use as a guide to keep the movement going full of vitality and energy. And the sad irony, for me, this is the sad irony of the fate of this prayer in the history, at least of the Western Church, is that for many of us, it's just become dead. It's become dead ritual. And I would encourage you to really reflect on the fact that the problem is not with the poem. The problem is with us. And that we've lost the original vitality and dynamism of what this poem is about. And it seems to me, in verse 9, when Jesus says to his disciples, hey, when you pray like this. I think he meant it. I think he actually meant it. That when we pray, we should pray like this. And somehow that's just not true of many of us or most of us. For many of us, prayer is a reactive habit. And my favorite, as soon as I heard this, I was like, yes, this is totally me. It's a little essay by Anne Lamott, if you like her writings on prayer. And she says, basically, here's prayer in my life. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Help me, help me, help me. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Right? And really, it just kind of boils down to that. And what are all of those? They're reactions. Something intense happens in my life, and then I react, I should pray about that. And then that's what we do. Or for others, it's the stream of consciousness and you get lost in your prayers or whatever. And so Jesus is trying to give to his disciples a proactive means of cultivating a regular habit of prayer. And because who Jesus is, the movement he's starting, it's so counterintuitive, he knows that it needs a perpetual infusion of fresh breath and energy. And so he gives us a poem that it seems to me, you look at verse 9, what do you think Jesus means? This is how you should pray. I think he means that this is how we should pray. I don't know, you draw the conclusion. I actually think he means it. And so what I'd like to do with the time that we have left is mostly share with you stuff that I think is amazing and cool about this prayer and help us think about 2015. What could it look like for us to make this prayer our prayer? Jesus is not giving a lecture, a dispassionate lecture here. He's giving his followers a gift. And where did this prayer come from? Notice that all of it is shaped in the language of Jesus. It's as if Jesus is praying this prayer, and that's because he did. He's given us his own prayer. As Jesus, retreated up, praying through the nights oftentimes, up on the Galilean hills, what do you think he was praying? What do you think guided his own prayers that energized him so that he could come back down off those hills and perpetuate the movement of the kingdom? And I'd submit to you that Jesus is giving his own heartbeat here. This poem, there's no better summary of the whole movement and mission of Jesus than these poetic words right here. Easy to memorize, and you get who Jesus is. And the purpose is not just that we learn about Jesus. The purpose is he wants to make us participants in the very movement that he began. And so we're just going to, here we go. You guys ready for action? We're just going to dive in. We're going to put the prayer on the screen and reflect on it. You can see the way I've structured it up here. It has a short introduction and then two sections of roughly equal length. And actually, each of those two sections is marked by 3 petitions or 3 requests. Let's just say it together. Let's just get it all in our heads. Join me. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. It begins with a short introduction saying who we're addressing, who are we praying to, and then we have these 2 sections here. Now, why am I saying these 2 sections are distinct right here? There's a clue, actually a really clear clue in the words themselves. Notice that the first main section is all dominated by this address to the Father. It's about your name, your kingdom, your will. But then it shifts to 3 main petitions about the community of the disciples. Give us bread, forgive us, lead us not into temptation. You guys see that there? It's like, oh, that's clear. Thank you, Jesus. It's like it's a poem that has literary, artistic structure to it to make it easy to memorize. Imagine Jesus being brilliant, Imagine that. So, and then it's structured in these 2 sets of 3 with the introduction here. And, back in the summer, we did a whole series on spiritual practices, and I taught a message on this prayer right here. And so there'll be a little repeat from that, but more new things we're going to explore. One thing that when somebody pointed out to me, it was just like, oh, duh, how amazing, is the fact that the prayer is actually structured according to what we learned in chapter 5 was Jesus' highest value, the highest value of the kingdom and of ethic. It's wrapped up in what Jesus called the greatest command, which he said had 2 sides to it. The command that is made up of the 2 greatest commands. And what in the ethic of the kingdom for a disciple, what is the greatest calling and the greatest command? First, so love God, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. It seems to me that Jesus has given us a prayer that reflects those 2 priorities, where we first orient ourselves to the Father and express our loyalty and allegiance and love for the Father and his priorities in our world. And then we turn our attention to us. And I think when he says us, he means us, even though in most of our minds we actually say me when we say that second half of the prayer, give me bread, forgive me, lead me not into temptation. Jesus is perfectly capable of saying the word me, but he doesn't say that, does he? He says us, which means there's some kind of communal element to that prayer, and we'll explore that in a minute. And so, again, this is Jesus condensing the very heartbeat of the kingdom movement he's launching. And he gives us this prayer that reflects the greatest command, which is love God, love your neighbor. He begins with this address to the Father. And this is significant in and of itself. The first thing we do, think of if Jesus wants us to pray this regularly, I think daily, even multiple times a day, then all of these are things that Jesus believes that we need to have ingrained in us as disciples of Jesus. Otherwise, the kingdom movement will lose its steam, will lose its momentum. So every line reflects something that Jesus thinks we need to say to ourselves daily and to say to the Father daily. And so he begins, Jesus apparently thinks that when you and I pray, we need to constantly remind ourselves who we're praying to. Right? So our Father who is in heaven. So notice that this is interesting. This is good Bible trivia. Use it at a party this year, sometime. But if you look through the teachings of Jesus, he occasionally calls God by the word God. He almost always refers to God with the word Father. Father. And that's unique. That's something unique about Jesus. There were other rabbis who taught and occasionally called God Father. And they were taking their cue from a handful of Psalms and Israel scriptures that call God a father. It's not a huge prominent idea in the Hebrew scriptures. Jesus made this a huge, huge emphasis of his own teaching. That and this has to do with Jesus' sense of who he was. He called himself the Son. And he called himself the one who came to reveal who God truly is in his truest nature. And as Jesus refers to God, he calls him
Father. Okay, so that's the beginning of the bite. So we'll start there. We'll continue another one. So let's start with some fun, easy stuff to kind of just get our brain juices flowing, and then we'll go from there. Okay. What did you think of Tim's calling the Lord's Prayer a poem? How'd you take it? Did it just like go by you, or did you go, I never thought it that way, or was there it's not a poem, it's a prayer? It's an interesting setup. I personally found it very intriguing and said, aha, interesting, and it brought up a whole bunch of stuff in my head. And part of it had to do with the poetry side. So I started doing some research. And the site I came across was Britannica's. And I had a flashback. I had this flashback, like the music, which we'll get into in a little bit, like Vietnam flashback. So I had the flashback of the original. There were two encyclopedias at the time when I was a kid growing up. There were two competing major encyclopedia providers, World Book Encyclopedia and Britannica. My parents spent, I had to ask them, I have no idea how much they spent, but I know that it cost them dearly to get my brother and I a set of World Book encyclopedias. And that at the time, that was like the modern day Google, right? That was, you wanted information, that's where you went. That's where you did research, you did that stuff. And I can't thank them enough for access to those tools, that information. The investment will go on for generations, and you don't even realize it. So thank you. So in this, I had this flashback with encyclopedia, with World Book. My folks got World Book for us. but this was from Britannica, the other company. And this company made it through times. There's no World Book site, but it's not that I'm aware of, but there is a Britannica still exists. This was Britannica, hence the diatribe. And this was about poetry. And it says, poetry, literature that evokes a concentrated imaginative awareness of an experience or a specific emotional response through language chosen and arranged for its meaning, sound, and rhythm. Poetry is a vast subject, as old as history and older. Present whenever religion is present, possibly under some definitions, the primal and primary form of languages themselves. And it really brought a bunch of things to my head. If you've ever listened to Hebrew, I have the privilege of, we've mentioned this before, that I get to listen to Rabbi David Foreman on a book club kind of thing that he has. It's called Shiny New Things right now. And so I'm very quiet. As a matter of fact, just my logo's up. My face isn't even up because I'm not wearing a kippah. And I want to pay all respect to the people that are there. And I just listen. And so there's a bunch of Hebrew going on. And when they're reading through things, he'll often say, let me read it and listen to it. You'll hear it and tell me what you hear. And you go, that's interesting. It's the sound and the repetition, and you'll catch Hebrew is a bunch of, often a repetition. In that repetition, we get the pickup of what's the predominant thought, something, whatever, okay? And it hit me this way, and I said, interesting on how this played out. And I thought about it as like when we begin to understand, when we begin to learn, we're in school, and we're speaking already. We just don't know why we're putting our language together the way we do. When you go to school, you can already talk. I was talking way too much. That's what Bob did. But we already talk, and we could put sentences together, and we could communicate. We just didn't know why, and we didn't know how. So they taught us alphabet, and the A, B, C, and you started to draw. And they helped us. And one of them was with a song, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me? And our teachers taught that to us. And we learned it, and it ingrained in us, and we learned this stuff. And that repetition helped us continue this thought. We had certain rhymes and riddles for your multiplication tables and different things, and adding and subtracting. And so much was part of how the language communicated itself. And I go, prayer is and oft the same thing. The Psalms are the same thing. Music. Scales. Scales are the ABCs. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Right? Okay. But that is the scales. Once you understand them, then music becomes something. And it becomes its own poetry. I can't fathom what we've lost in not hearing the music that David set up in the Psalms. We get the words, and then we get them translated to English, and we don't get, if you hear them in Hebrew, it's a much different sound. That oft almost lyrical. But you don't have the music. We miss an element. We're missing a critical element. We don't want to do this with something as recent, still 2,000 years ago, but where Yeshua is talking, right? Okay, so now let's jump in the deep end. I have mixed emotions about like the the song from Buffalo Springfield. Okay, it its original author wrote something. Pick the story. It gets taken out of context, stuck into something, and now it becomes the anthem for something else. Social media does this all the time. Movies all the time. They take a soundbite. How many commercials have you heard? And if you really knew the song or took the time to know the song, or there's the tune, you listen to the words, you go, oh my gosh, that original musician is probably going, what are they doing with my song? However, they sold the rights to whoever, and the people who own the rights will take the money. So they'll take the money that Toyota pays them, or whoever the company is that does it, plays a song, and that clip plays out, and that was never the intent of the original author. And I struggle with this because I go, that's not what they meant when they did this. And taking from it, it's almost stealing, in the sense that you're robbing it of its original thought and its original intent, especially from the culture. The ends justify the means. This helps rally and gets it, and I sell cars, and so it works for me. I want to take a short side trip here about taking something and the ends justifying the means. And I'll make it personal, meaning there's a sport that I enjoy. It's NASCAR. It's not a secret here, right? And they just had a race in Talladega, which is kind of ironic that I bring this up, because the guy that won the race, due to rained out, blah, 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 but the guy who was in front and wins the race is Bubba Wallace. He is the only African-American driver at NASCAR's highest tier, the Cup Series, in their National Touring Series. So he's the only African-American driver. So last year at Talladega, there was an event that happened. News got out that there was a rope that was tied to a garage door in the pit area of Talladega, and it was tied in the shape of a noose. It was one of those pull down doors, ropes that go on garage doors. They have roll up bay doors, right? And there's a noose. And it's found in Bubba Wallace's bay, where he was with the 43 team last year, and where they parked it. So the press in this Black Lives Matter run with this. And the story develops that this is somebody's poking a racial slur at Bubba and his team, and they're just appalled. NASCAR starts an investigation, and there's a groundswell. It's a huge groundswell of support. And then the sport rallies and says there is no place for racism in our sport. I totally agree. No place for racism in any sport, in our lives, period. In this one, they happen to be talking about sport. And they take, and so they have this big walk. They have this big, in unity, they come together. All the drivers walk with Bubba Wallace. They push his car down pit road, and they all show this wonderful support for Bubba in this as he's to deal with this, right? Because the press has just made a big deal of this. Race goes on, blah, blah, blah. NASCAR is investigating. They want to know what happened. If they can find the culprits, they're going to find the culprits. So their investigation. What gets found out and mentioned, but very byline and very low key, that they'd done the investigation. That rope had been there for years. Somebody had just taken one of those hang down cords in their garage, just tied it in the shape of a noose, and just, I trust me, I've seen it. My kid wanted tying up ropes. People just do things and da-da-da. Somebody decided to have a little fun, and it had been there. And Bubba Wallace just happened to be in that stall then. NASCAR gets the stalls are picked out by where you are in the points, how you're falling out, where your point is for your team at the time. Bubba's stall just happens to be there. there's no place for racism. However, the event as portrayed was not true. It was not real. The event itself, which you built it up as, didn't happen. Does that make it right? Because they did that? It's a question, and it's a tough pill to swallow. Does the end justify the means? And if you say, well, da da da, and you go, how far does the end justify the means? And that's bad. Okay. Now, Mackie brings up in this, which I love, is to flip it, is he's trying to start something, and he puts it out there for people to do, and somewhere along the line, in the years going by, we've lost it. What is the phrase he put it? Here it is. It has lost its vitality and sense of motivating energy. Its words are overly familiar and dead to us. And oh, that is a crushing blow when you hear that. And did you note the date? Mackie's talking end of 2014, 2015. And he's interesting how he's talking about in the back about Vietnam and things that happen in generations in time and cultural upheaval and events that happen that cause things. We're in one of those today, I would suggest, right? And what comes out of this would be interesting. So I wrote this, and let me throw this out. Okay, so I'll interject what I've been saying on Dusty for years. Our lives with God and Jesus are relationship-based interaction. So if I'm in the traditional style of prayer, how does that fit into our marriage / significant / dating relationships? If we treated the same discussion in that relationship, how would we take it? Should we approach it with it's all about me and what can you do for me and what's all about what I need, and then only apologizing for what I did wrong at the end? Well, and I'm just sorry. If that's how you dealt with if that's how we dealt with our wives, and all it is was, well, I need this, I need this, and I screwed up, I'm sorry. After you've done it, now you're apologizing for it. Is that really how you want to have this interactive relationship conversation that he's having? And I think that Jesus takes this and he's, when he's pointing this out, he's changing how we look and think about these things. Tim brings up a point that Jesus intended us to use this prayer. Maybe first as what it is, and then maybe what it can become. Okay? I have a Post-it note here that I keep. There's a row of Post-it notes when I think of something and remember something or something that I want to keep for later and do this. So this says R2 versus how to, right? And the thought is they know they're supposed to pray. The people that are around him there, they know they're supposed to pray. So what they're interested in is not that they are to. They understand the are to. They're asking the how to. And you go, okay, so Jesus shares this with them. 2 sections, 3 parts with the Matthew setup. He gets this. So let's take a peek at this first. Now let's dig in, get a little meaty here for a little bit real quick. So here it is. This is, I like the scriptures, 2009. That's what I like to read. I like some of the verbiage and terminology. I really wish Alter would do, Robert Alter has a translation for the Old Testament. But then again, he's a Jewish thought. Okay. But I really wish Alter could do something with the New Testament too, because I like how it is approached with words. However, so the TS is what works for me. So here it is. This then is the way you should pray. Our Father, who is in the heavens, let your name be set apart. Let your reign come. Let your desire be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into trial, but deliver us from the wicked one, because yours is the reign and the power and the esteem forever. Amen. Okay? So if you notice it in blue is our Father. So remember this. This is that deal where we're acknowledging first you're the Father. And Mackie's point on there was this is familiar, and we're going to get in some other renditions in his prayers of it's very familiar, and he expects it's his children. That's okay, in this. And then it's about him. Let your name be set apart. Let your name be holy. Let your reign come. Let your desire or your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it says, give us today our daily bread. This sounds like it's nice, God's, for daily provision, blah, blah, blah. It says, for the children, when they're hearing this and this audience is listening to this, this is screaming manna. This is screaming manna. All of them, this draws them back to the stories that they've heard for years with the children of Israel in the desert, in the wilderness. And then forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Again, us words, we and our, those are us words, not I words, but us words. There is a communal element to this. There's a communal element to this, and we need to remember that. Lead us, do not lead us into trial, but deliver us from the wicked one, because yours is the reign and the power and the esteem forever. And I've mentioned it before here. You notice that if you look at the detail, the adversary, the evil one, is not named. We take the word and create it, and we give the adversary a name. Notice Jesus doesn't even bother to mention his name. His name isn't even worth speaking. Merely the fact he exists, and he's wicked and he's evil. Okay? And that's interesting. So the Flip Wilson, the devil made me do it, Satan made me do it, da-da-da. Not a deal. Not a name, not a scoop. You're not worth my time. But the Father, your, and us. Okay? Now, one of the biggies that I said, okay, wait a minute. I know we're in the Matthew series, but context of one of the important points that we have. So let's take a look real quick here at another prayer section. Luke's version. Okay? And it happened as he was praying in a certain place. When he ceased, one of his disciples said to him, Lord, teach us to pray, as John also taught his disciples. And he said to them, when you pray, say, Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done, as in heaven, also on earth. Give us day by day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we also forgive everyone who is indebted to us. Lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. So we have the same repetition, right? Important. By the way, I decided when listening to that again, it clicked, we are going to have that bonus episode because there's really an important tie-in that we want to talk about here that we're going to dabble into here. We're definitely going to take it down the road in that additional episode. So I want to dabble in it here. We're just going to kind of tiptoe through it a little bit. We'll get into the meat of it later. Fair? Okay. So, Jesus was very big on do as I say and as I do. And the hypocritical side of the Pharisees at the time, the leadership, and he's going, listen to what they say because they're speaking, they're reading from the scroll, and they're saying some of the stuff they're saying is fine. He said, but their example, don't do what they're doing because they're hypocritical behavior. So I look at Jesus and I go, okay, this is a good prayer. And you wonder, does Jesus actually do this? In other words, it's not a good prayer to tell his people, but does he actually do this? Is this something that goes? And there's not a lot of prayers recorded with him. He says he went up and he prayed. What we're going to talk about in that other episode are the bookends to these verses, and a lot of these verses on this, the verses before and the verses after, and that context that comes in. So understand, we're going to go there in this bonus episode because those are important parts that we're missing in this conversation as we go these 3 weeks. Maybe I'll scooch it in the last week. If not, we will have the bonus episode. But we really want to grab this and not do it as just justice. We want to make sure that we take it in context in these pieces as well. And we'll go from here. So here's another prayer that Jesus prayed. Okay. This is in Matthew 26. We're at the end, right? And going forward a little, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "Oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I desire, but you desire." And he's talking to the disciples. And he goes, "Watch and pray lest you enter into trial. The spirit is eager, but the flesh is weak." And he went away a second time and prayed, saying, "Oh, Father, if it is impossible for this to pass unless I drink it, let your desire be done." And he left them and went away again and prayed a third time, saying the same words. Sounds pretty simple to me. His words are, he said, not only do I say it, but I do it. In my most painful time, the thing I told you to do is what I'm falling back on. In my most trying time, what I told you to do is what I'm falling back on. In Luke, and when he was at the place, he said to them, "Pray that you not enter into temptation." And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed and said, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." And an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat were great drops of blood falling to the ground. And he rose up from the prayer, came to the disciples, and he found them sleeping because of sorrow. And he said to them, "Why do you sleep? Rise and pray lest you enter into temptation." And Mark, and he went forward a little on the ground, and he prayed, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, "Abba, Father, all things are possible to you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." And he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "Simon, do you sleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed and spake the same words. And he returned and found them sleeping again, for their eyes were heavy. Neither did they know what to answer him. And he came a third time and said to them, "Sleep now, take your rest. It is enough. The hour is come. Behold, the Son of Man has been betrayed into the hands of sinners." Again, just bringing what he talked about. Now, here's the twist we're going to get to with this. He's teaching this prayer. He's starting this out. He's mentioned it. And we're going to find in context that the two Lord's Prayers that we get are at different times. They're spoken at different times. We've talked about this in Dusty, that these are repetitive lessons. We're not catching the only instance of these. These are repetitive lessons. They're taught multiple times. In 3 years, he continues this as he goes through the countryside. He's meeting these people, hundreds of people, as he's going through the countryside, and thousands at points when he has groups that he's getting big enough that he has to feed, right? And he's repeating these lessons again and again and again. And in the Lord's Prayer, we're going to see it in context. Luke's version is going to have it in a different context. I want to talk about that context in that bonus episode because it's important, because it helps us understand that this isn't a single thing in a one piece, is that he keeps saying this. And then we see in the end, he bookends this. This is at towards the beginning of his deal. And we get the end, he bookends, like I said, he goes back and said, I've taught you when you're going to go back and this is going to happen. This is the story that's shared. You think these people didn't, these men, these writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when they're capturing their different pieces, that they're not flashback remembering what was told, and they're hearing Jesus say these things, and they're seeing the connections. They're seeing those pieces of the puzzle connect. And I think we need to look at those and see those too, which is why something like this is so important, and where it takes us out of ourselves and into the Father and the Father's will and what it does for others. And I really, really, really wanted to remember that. This is reflective. This is one of the things that hit me earlier this week when I was chewing on a lot of this. We're reflecting the Father's will. We're reflecting the Father's ways. We're reflecting God as a whole with light. And in reflective, usually it's a ground up material that's embedded into something. It's in the paint, in lines in the road. During Sukkot, out in the countryside, and you're driving along in the dark, but the center lines light up. Hasn't always been that way. When I was a kid, it was dark, and you couldn't see the lines, and if your lights were bad, and the lines were old, you barely could figure out where you were in the road. Now we've got rumble strips, and bright reflective lights, and reflective vests, and hats, and put on wristbands, and watches, and jackets on your shoes, and all that. It reflects, but only reflects when it gets hit with light. So, one, are we reflecting God's light and not somebody else's light? What are we reflecting? What are our lives reflecting? What are we sharing that reflects? Are our Facebook posts reflecting, repeating the world's reflection? Is that chain, once you're tied to that chain, you're tied to it. Is there how do I put this? Ooh, this is ugly. This is going to be rough. Guilt by association. In other words, you get tied to posts. In the post, complaining about a post on social media only emboldens the post that you're fighting. Okay? It only emboldens the post you're fighting. It doesn't care whether you like it or don't. That's 1,000 hits, and it gets more to 10,000, 20,000. They go viral. Half are opposed, half are deal. Somebody's making money out of it, and you're tied to whatever it's go over. And people get lost in the deal, and you're stuck with this, and it's stuck with you. You end up reflecting what you're trying to fight. You're reflecting what you're trying to fight. We're supposed to be reflecting God. So how do we do that? This is what this series and part of the thing talks about. And those are the challenges that we have. Ouch. That hurts. I was pondering something, and I used that word, and I wrote something this morning. I was in a conversation with a very dear friend of mine, and I hope he doesn't take offense to this, because it's not. It's Todd Jordan, and he and I love to midrash. We bounce back and forth. We struggle with things, and we don't agree on things together, and it's fine. I love him so much, and I'm fine that we don't agree on things, and where we struggle and we do, and it's refreshing, and it's invigorating, and it helps me focus on this. And this is what came today when I shared something, and I hit it to you. And this is what I want to do. Maybe it's another section I'm gonna have in some of mine. They're gonna go. Let's call it the ponder. Okay. It's an interesting thought to ponder when you want to tell and share anything to folks. Do we actually care about them and where they have been or how they view certain things, especially in relation to God? What is their understanding of God? How did they get there? What events in their lives have either brought them to God or pushed them away from God? Have they been taught or told a story from their past, either from a personal family or friend story or a cultural story? And what sway does that have in their understanding or thinking? Multicultural issues in history. What has been shared, taught, told through their families for generations? Do we care enough about our friends, neighbors, community to find out about them? To care and love them in the way they receive love? Can we accept the love they are trying to give, the way they express it? Do we care to love them first? Help them first? Maybe heal them first? Then share the kingdom, the best way we understand it. How do we really live or express that second greatest command that is likened unto the first? To love our neighbors as ourselves. We love talking at or to people, but so does the world. Example was social media. But how are we different? How do we change that perception that you Christians are all the same, just like them, hypocrites? How do we do and show love differently? I don't have the answers. Only some more challenges and questions, and the beginning of trying to do things a different way. That will be a slow process for sure. I'm hoping and praying for future generational impact. Only time will tell, long after I am dead. A slow look back. And Toby Mack shared a quote from Thelma Davis that fits this point. The way you treat people says a lot about who you are. Be careful. Your actions are screaming over your words. Thelma Davis. Thanks for sharing that, Thelma. And thanks, Toby. And thanks for being with us tonight again on The Dusty Feet.